Right. So we're solving two CAT 2023 RCs, right? Now, what happens in CAT is we have 3 slots. And earlier, when we had 2 slots, we used to have a trend. Like 1 year, you could have verbal, which was tough. Another year, verbal would be easy. Some other section would be tough and so on. So CAT 2017, verbal was pretty easy. 2018 also was easy, maybe a little bit tougher. CAT 2019, verbal was really hard, right? But then from 2020, after COVID struck, and we have these 3 slots. So what they did was they have been having a different, at least definitely from 2021, they've been having a different section, which is tough, right? So if you are in slot 1, you could have a tough verbal. And then when you go to slot 2, verbal would be doable and you might have like quant or DILR, which is on the tougher side, right? Probably the thinking could have been, see, if there are only 2 slots, even if you're in the second slot, there's not that much feedback that you're able to get from those who are from slot 1. Or it could be that, that particular IAM feels that, maybe making one section a little bit tougher. Not even that IAM, I would say that convener might have a view, right? Which is also why we say, hey, like this year, IAM Calcutta is administering the CAT exam. Don't read anything to it saying that Calcutta is known for finance, so quant is going to be harder, verbal is going to be easy, or last time that IAM Calcutta had done it, this is how it was, or something like that, right? So there really aren't trends like that because the individual convener is different, a different person each time. And typically the questions also, from what we know, are sort of collated by a bunch of people, right? Made by a bunch of people. So again, you wouldn't have one in-shoot influencing it in a certain way. But coming back to what I was saying, now different slots, different sections will be a little bit, easier or tougher. And how that gets taken care of is by something called normalization or scaling. So what will happen is, now let's say if we are in, let's say if I was last year in CAT 2023, I was in slot 1, right? Where the verbal was something which was on the easy to medium side, right? So I'll say easy to medium. And then you had slot 2, where it was comparatively harder, right? Tougher. And then you had slot 3, which again was on the easy to medium side. So what they do is they will look at the average, right? So let's say the average of all of the people who are in slot 1, say it was 25. I'm just throwing a random number, right? It obviously wasn't that, because 25 itself is 85 percentile or a little above. But let's say the average is this, right? And then let's say, suppose you have 20 here, and then suppose you have 28 here, right? So obviously it's not fair to those who are in slot 2 if you just go with these scores. So they'll do something like called normalization or scaling up or scaling down, where what they will do is they'll work out an equation in such a way that if you have got 25 here, your score will go down a bit, right? So it'll get decreased. If you are at 20 here, your score will go up a bit. If you're at 28 here, your score will definitely go down, right? So somewhere around 23, 20, 24 marks, something like that is where it would come to. So if you in this slot have ended up getting, let's say 18, that 18 might end up becoming 615 or 16, something like that, right? If you, on the other hand, have got, let's say 50 or 45, suppose, right? So that 45 will not go down so much. Reason being, if someone has got 18 in an easier slot, they know that person is not great at verbal. But if someone has got 45 in an easy slot, they know that, we shouldn't reduce that same 3 marks, because this person, even in a tougher slot, would have done well. So this might become something like 44 or 43.5. I'm just very randomly throwing numbers, okay? So that is the way it will happen. Now that same 18 here could end up becoming 20, right? Or 21 or whatever. But that 45 might actually end up becoming even like 48 or 49 or 50. Why? Because if in a tough slot, someone's got 18, in an easier slot, of course, they'll be able to do better. But in a tough slot, if someone's got 45, they would have got a much higher score in a comparatively easier slot, right? So that's how the thinking goes. So that is basically how it would be. So everybody will sort of average out and come to like a, like a score which is sort of like average of what you might have got if you had been in each of the 3 slots, right? Now, of course, the aim would be to make the average or even the trend of the score as close as possible, but sometimes it doesn't happen. So that is there. Having said that, CAT 2023, Slot 2 is where verbal was widely regarded to be tough. You can see that in the average scores. The average scores were almost double-digit lower, and normalization also has been considerable. And if some of you have gone through our YouTube channel where we've posted experiences with some of our last year students, many of them have given this feedback that, hey, verbal was easy for me. So I was going in thinking this is where I'm going to ace it. I'm going to get that 40, 45, whatever. But turned out to be tough. And I knew that, somewhere I could only target so much. And so I had to improve my scores in DILR or quad. Or verbal is my weaker section. And on top of it, this was like, I got into a slot where verbal was even tougher. So I knew that I might not get a great score. So I had to somehow manage that nervousness and still go on and do DILR and quad. Why am I structuring what I'm saying like this? Because this is exactly what is going to happen to us in CAT 2024 also, right? You might end up like, you will have some slot which is tough and some slot which is easy. So how do you maximize your scores in the easier? I mean, you'll have some section which is tough and some section which is easy. So how do you maximize your scores in the whichever section is easier? And how do you sort of still ensure that you get a decent score in something which is tough, and you tweak your strategy, right? So if I have a tougher VARC section, I might do one RC less. Not me personally, I'm speaking from your perspective. I've been finishing the paper every year, but you don't need to finish the paper to get that 99. And a lot of you guys will be in a scenario where, I mean, there'll be only about, I guess about 1% people who'll be finishing the verbal section. So coming back to what I was saying, so if it's a tougher section, you might just, focus a little bit more, solve fewer questions, but make sure that your accuracy is as high as possible so that you're getting that scaling up. If it's an easy section, you try to maximize and solve as many questions as possible. One, that'll obviously push your overall score up. And since it's an easier section, you can do it. Second is, your marks could get scaled down a little bit, right? So this is, of course, very briefly, I'm telling you the strategy as we do these mocks and all. Like in the previous mock also, we discussed in detail how to manage it. So we had verbal where, all of the non-RCs were pretty much really tough. So what do you do in that scenario? And how do you tweak your DILR and quant strategy, right? So that's there. Okay, cool. So now coming to what was the actual message that I wanted to give you guys. Now, these were from CAT 2023 slot 2, right? These are 2 RCs from there. And this slot, the verbal was supposed to be tougher, and it was tougher. The marks for people in this section, it dropped there. Ultimately, the raw scores were less. So by normalization, their score got scaled up. And I've had multiple students where they've been getting decent scores, and the scores that they were getting in the mocks, they got a little bit lower. And that's what happens when that particular section is hard, right? But if you see, in this, a lot of you guys have got 6 out of 8, 7 out of 8, 8 out of 8, right? And that is how it is. Even in a tough slot, a tough section, you will have some questions which are easy. So our job becomes, how do I find those easy ones, right? Now, obviously, this is a little bit easier to do in verbal than say DILR, because DILR, you might go in and, spend 10, 15 minutes on a case and then only realize that, hey, I'm not getting anywhere, right? So it could be like that. But in verbal, we more or less, by reading the passage, we will understand that, hey, this is a genre which I'm more comfortable with. The catch which can come up is, it can be a passage which seems easy, seems doable, but the questions are tough. Or it might be vice versa, where the passage might seem tough, but the questions are actually on the easier side. Maybe they're more direct or something like that. Sometimes passages will come a little bit disguised. There's a CAT 2022 RC on technology, which we've done about a couple of weeks back, where it starts out talking about techno-social dualism or something like that. And it seems super hard. But then when we read the entire passage, there's one clear message which is there, and all of the questions are largely based on it. In fact, there are 2 questions which have come from just the one paragraph. So if anybody understands that paragraph well, those 2 questions, definitely you are getting it, right? So you do have that, where certain RCs are a little bit easier as you keep reading, but they just seem disguised. Like this one also, the Netflix RC, the way it starts and all, it's not a very easy to read, right? There's a little bit complication which is there. Having said that, both of these RCs are definitely doable RCs, right? So on that note, let's look to start off, and strategically just remember these. Even if when you're taking a mock or when you're taking the actual exam, even if you get in and whichever section it is, it just seems hard to you, just try to find the easy question. There will be some easy questions, right? Another thing, which for those of you who haven't seen it, if you go onto our YouTube and close to last year, right, sometime in December, I believe, when the response sheet came out, There's a longish video which Vignesh has posted. If you go through that, you'll see that he's shown that how even in a year where quant is widely regarded to be tough, there were so many questions which were sort of either similar to previous questions, so previous year questions, so using like similar concepts, or which was similar to what we've had in our practice. I think with combining the practice questions, there were about 10 to 12 questions, I believe, which were very, very easily solvable. And 12 questions is well above 99th percentile in quant last year, right? And if you're getting that 36 marks, or even if you're getting 30 marks is more than 1/3 of the 76 marks that we needed last year to get that 99th percentile. Right? So you will have easy questions, and that is our job, to find the easy questions. So now on to this, what I'll do is I'll sort of solve it the way we would actually see it. Of course, I've solved it. I know the answers and all that. I've done it just a couple of days before, a couple of days after the response sheet came out. But I will sort of like, just take you guys through how I would do it. And that will take me longer. Like, I'll be speaking and reading and taking notes and all of that. If I were just doing it for myself, it would be faster. But I'm aiming to sort of take you guys through that journey also, right? So let's do it that way. Yeah. So I'll just have my notes here. Obviously, in the actual exam, it would be a notepad where I'd be writing. So looking at the questions, based on the passage, we can infer that the opposite of fast fashion, slow fashion, would most likely refer to clothes that, right? Now we have to infer the meaning of slow fashion based on the passage. So I'll particularly pay attention to both fast fashion as well as slow fashion, right? And because it is saying infer, it might not be something which is very directly given, or I might not give the answer. So if I know what is fast fashion, right, and based on that, I can figure out what is slow fashion, I don't want to do that. I want to understand the context based on what the passage is saying. So I'll solve this question at the end. Central idea of the passage would be undermined if, right? So these are the most common, like the bread and butter of inferential questions, right? The author's view would be strengthened by, would be weakened by. Undermine is something which is very similar to weakened by, maybe just a tad even harsher than weakened by, right? So again, we have to find out what is the central idea and what is the author's view. So once we have that, then we look to solve this. According to the author, companies like ThreadUp have not caught on in the UK for all of the following reasons except that. That means whatever this ThreadUp is, it's not caught on in the UK. It's not become popular in the UK for 3 out of these 4 reasons. Whichever one is not a reason for it not becoming popular, that becomes the idea. So direct multiple question, again, something which I will solve at the end. The art of thrifting, as described in the passage, can be considered ironic because it. So something which is ironic is, it's quite the opposite of straightforward, right? There's some issue here that we've got to, some negative that we've got to figure out. So if there's something about thrifting that we figure it out, we look to solve it then and there. Otherwise, even this we could solve at the end. Just repeating again, something which I tell you guys in multiple classes. If your speed is such that you're solving an RC in 10 to 15 minutes and getting a 3 out of 4 on average, you can try to read the questions. If your speed is slower than that, don't spend time reading the questions. Just read 2 paragraphs of each RC and choose the doable RCs. Halfway through, if an RC is seeming hard, you can always leave it. And definitely don't do it because, you want to find a particular type of question. So if you're reading saying that, hey, I'm better at direct questions, so let me look for the passage which has direct questions, don't do that. A lot of times, direct questions will be there more in sort of like, harder RCs, because if an RC is tough, they would want to sort of like, make the questions a little bit easier many times. But more importantly, we will generally have more inferential questions. So we don't want to be escapist and we don't want to avoid a type of question. Our idea is to put in the learning, put in the practice. You all have lessons, classes, daily POV, practice questions, daily quizzes, so much that's there to help you, right? So aim to understand how to solve each and every type of question. Okay, so on that note, potentially this thrifting is something which we can solve. Everything else we'll solve at the end. One thing which I'm focusing on is fast and slow fashion. The second-hand September campaign led by Oxfam seeks to encourage shopping at local organizations and charities as alternatives to fast fashion brands or whatever, in the name of saving our planet. So the second-hand campaign is shop at local organizations and charities. From the word second-hand, I can understand that this probably means shopping for second-hand clothes, right? As an alternative to fast fashion brands in the name of saving our planet. So doing this is going to save our planet. So let's understand why. As innocent as mindless scrolling through online shops may seem, such consumers are unintentionally contributing to an industry that uses more energy than aviation. So this in the clothes or garments or apparel industry is something which is using up a lot of energy, obviously harmful for the planet. Why? Because using energy could lead to more CO2 carbon emissions, which could lead to more global warming. Or it's also obviously, there's limited energy which is there. So we don't want so much energy. A lot of it could be fossil fuels, coal, things like that, right? So consumers are unintentionally, perhaps even knowingly. So they might know and do it, or they might unintentionally be contributing to this particular, sector, which is using up a lot of energy. Okay, so net, what we are learning is probably these secondhand, buying secondhand clothes or buying clothes at local organization is something which is good for the planet. Brits buy more garments than any other country in Europe. So it comes as no shock that many of these clothes end up in UK landfills each year. 300,000 tons of them to be exact. Huge amount, right? I mean, consider the population of UK, right? Way less than India. Huge amount, which is ending up in landfills, which is where we are throwing our garbage, right? Let's say you don't know the word landfill, can guess it from tons. Otherwise, next sentence makes it easy. This waste of clothing is destructive to our planet, releasing greenhouse gases as clothes are burnt, as well as bleeding toxins and dyes into the surrounding soil and water, right? So, second-hand clothes, these are good, right? So I would typically just put a tick or something like that. But here, since I'm not taking notes in, in my notepad, I'm just writing helpful, right? So now why is it? Because clothes get wasted, then they release CO2 or greenhouse gases, multiple greenhouse gases, and toxins and dyes basically get out. So whatever clothes are being thrown in landfill, they are leaching toxins and dyes, which are coming into the soil and water, right? So just put toxins in soil and water. Again, water, I'd probably write H2O or something, make it even shorter. As ecologist Chelsea Rothman bluntly puts it, the mismanagement of our waste has even come back to haunt us on our dinner plate. Why dinner plate? Probably soil. That soil is where, crops are being grown, water, maybe the fish we eat, that same dye or toxins are coming there. It's not surprising then that people are scrambling for a solution, the most common of which is secondhand shopping. Now we're very clear that this, the secondhand movement, it's for secondhand clothes. It's not just shopping locally. It's basically shopping for clothes which somebody else has already worn. And this makes sense, right? The problem is waste. So much of clothes are getting wasted. So if someone is buying at least part of it, that definitely seems to be helpful. It is minimizing all this environmental damage. Retailers selling consigned clothing probably means second-hand clothing again. Why else would this be given? Retailers selling consigned clothing are currently expanding at a rapid rate. If everyone bought just one used item in a year, it would save 449 million pounds of waste, equivalent to the weight of 1 million polar bears. Thrifting, important, we have a question. Thrifting has increasingly become a trendy practice. London is home to many second-hand or commonly coined vintage shops across the city, right? So second-hand clothes, buying it, another thing which it is called as thrifting. This is something which is helpful. And at the same time, it has also become trendy, right? So it's trending. A lot of people are doing it. There's a lot of second-hand shops which are there in London. Passage is written in UK, right? It's based in UK. So you're cool and you care about the planet. You have killed two birds with one stone. So because it's something trendy, you've also established yourself as cool. But, really important word, do people simply purchase a second-hand item, flash it on Instagram with hashtag vintage and call it a day without considering whether what they are doing is actually effective? So just look at this, right? We have the word but here. Of course, we're going to focus on this sentence. So it's only now that this entire thing is being questioned, right? It's trendy, fine. Is it actually helpful? What we are doing, is it actually effective? In the sense, is it actually minimizing greenhouse gas emission? Is it actually minimizing the toxins? According to a study commissioned by Patagonia, for instance, older clothes shed more microfibers. These can end up in our rivers and seas after just one wash due to the worn material, thus contributing to microfiber pollution. So thrifting is something which there are negatives also. Older clothes, I'll just say more shedding, right? I understand it's microfibers and all. I'll just write MFs. Okay, because it's older clothes, so it's been used a few times. So it's more likely to shed these microfibers. To break it down, the amount of microfibers released by laundering 1 lakh fleece jackets is equivalent to as many as this many grocery bags, and up to 40% of that ends up in our ocean. So it's a sizable quantity, right? The author is giving these numbers to help us understand the sizable quantity. So there's a lot of microfibers, and a lot of it actually ends up in the ocean. So where does this leave second-hand consumers? They would be well advised to buy high-quality items that shed less and last longer, as this combats both microfiber pollution and excess garments ending up in landfills. So because this is there, what is the solution to this? We need to buy better quality clothes. Now, better quality clothes have two advantages. One, the shedding is less. Second, since it's better quality, maybe it's more expensive, I want to use it for longer, right? So that also ends up sort of reducing waste. If I bought something for a very small amount, some secondhand, maybe t-shirt or something, I might just wear it 2-3 times, and then again, I'll also trash it, right? So the problem just got pushed by a little bit. But if I bought something which is higher quality, maybe I have, paid a little bit more. More importantly, the quality is better. So I might actually wear it quite a few times, even though it's secondhand, right? So if we are ending up buying quality second-hand clothes, I'll just put two clothes to, help me understand that second-hand. It's reducing this microfiber pollution, and it is also reducing wastage. So this was one issue for which the author has now found a solution. Luxury brands would rather not circulate their latest season stock around the globe to be sold at a cheaper price, which is why companies like ThredUp, a US fashion resale marketplace, have not yet caught on in the UK. Now, what is the problem? Older clothes, one thing we understood. Second is when it comes to luxury brands, right? They are not interested. They don't want their clothes to be sold secondhand at a cheaper price. Maybe because a lot of people will buy it. Maybe because, their brand value will go down and all. Let's probably not speculate at this point. Let's understand. ThredUp is again important. There's another question on this. So companies like ThredUp have not caught on in the UK because luxury brands don't want this. They don't want people to buy their clothes secondhand. There'll always be a market for consignment. Consignment, we know, is like, buying secondhand stuff. But there's also a whole generation of people who have been taught that only buying new products is the norm. Secondhand luxury goods are not in their psyche. So those who basically are buying luxury clothes, the luxury brands don't want secondhand sales, right? Just writing two instead of writing secondhand. And buyers also want only new clothes. So now the second problem, first problem was with cheaper quality older clothes which shed microfibers. The second problem is with these luxury brands and their buyers, right? Ben Whittaker told Prospect that unless recycling becomes cost effective and filters into mass production. So recycling is also something which is expensive, right? So it has to become cost effective. It has to become a little cheaper, and it has to be done in mass production, right? So only if it gets to a certain price can a lot of clothes be recycled, right? So unless that happens with the right technology to partner it, high-end retailers would rather put brand before sustainability. So high-end retailers, they don't care as much about sustainability. They need recycling to become more cost effective, and they also don't want this, right? They don't want their clothes to be sold at a cheaper price. Okay, so net, what have we understood? We'll solve the two questions which are around this ThredUp and all right away. But just to summarize the author's view, a lot of people are thrifting, are buying secondhand clothes. This is written in UK, so the perspective of UK, because clothes, when we are buying it and then when we are trashing them, it leads to a lot of wastage, greenhouse gas emissions, a lot of toxins and all. So people are buying secondhand clothes. It's also something which has become trendy, which has become cool, right? However, there are issues with it. What are the issues? There's microfiber shedding. And when it comes to luxury brands, neither the brands nor the buyers seem to want this. It's also something which has a high cost, right? It's not cost effective at the moment. So we can see that the author is saying that thrifting by itself might not be as great a solution as a lot of people are thinking, right? It depends on what we are buying, right? So when it comes to, buying lower quality clothes, for example, it's not helpful because there's a lot of microfiber shedding. And when it comes to luxury brands, again, it's something which might be not doable, right? So along with thrifting, we basically need clothes to be recycled also in a more cost effective manner. So what do these luxury brands want? They basically want, or let me put it as, they basically want low cost, recycling, right? They don't want other people buying their clothes secondhand, which will, at a reduced price. Instead, they want to recycle these clothes. But right now, recycling is something which is expensive. So in short, the author's view is a lot of people seem to think that thrifting is great because, it's reducing environmental damage. But many times with older clothes, with luxury brands and all, this might not be the right solution. So we can see that the author is not extremely for thrifting. The act of thrifting, as described in the passage, can be considered ironic because now when is something ironic? Something is ironic where it's not a good thing. It's not a super positive, right? So I'm going to look for something which seems positive, but is negative. Like in this case, thrifting seems positive. It seems good. Everybody is wanting to do it, but there are negatives, right? So what is the negative? Now, thrifting is something which we are doing to save the environment. We're buying secondhand clothes because we want to save the environment, minimize damage to the environment. But thrifting itself is something which is harming the environment because of microfibers and all of that, right? So that makes A the answer. It has created environmental problems, right? It's not cost effective for retailers. No, that cost effective is something which is written in the context of recycling, right? So high-end retailers, they want recycling to become cost effective. So that is not the thing. Offers luxury clothing at cut rate prices. If that was the case, that'd be great for consumers, right? Not for the companies, of course, as such. So this is not something which is ironic. This is also not something which is happening because luxury brands don't want this. Companies like ThredUp and all have not even caught up because of that. Is an anti-consumerist attitude? Not really. There's nothing that we've learned in the passage about anti-consumerist attitude, right? So that's what we go for. Now, we had that one question about ThredUp. So we'll solve that first because we do have all of it. It's structured like a direct multiple, but actually, if you see, all of the points are given over here, right? So from here, we can solve it. Companies like ThredUp have not caught on in the UK for all of the following reasons, except we have my reasons here, right? Luxury brands don't want secondhand sales. Even the luxury brand buyers, they don't want it. Then we know that, recycling is not cost effective and all of that. The British don't buy secondhand clothing. This is definitely not the case because we've been told that retailers selling consigned clothing are currently expanding at a rapid rate. It's something which is trendy. It's something which is cool. So this has to be the answer, right? Because the British are buying. They just not buy. The ones who buy luxury clothes are not buying. But we can't say that all British people are not buying secondhand clothing. So that'd be an extrapolation error. And hopefully you don't do it because in the beginning it is given that this is something which has become popular. Luxury brands do not like their product to be devalued. On the other hand, is given. That's what we were discussing, right? They don't want this. They want to maintain their brand image. Again, from this same place, we are basically getting it, right? Recycling is currently not financially attractive for luxury brands. Again, something which is given. Unless it becomes cost effective, they will put brand before sustainability. What do we infer from that? This is something which hasn't happened. Recycling hasn't become cost effective. So this is again something which we'll go for because this is not given. Okay, so now couple of these. We can infer that the opposite of fast fashion, slow fashion would most likely refer to clothes too. Now, remember, we've been told that there are some sorts of, clothes, secondhand clothes, which are not helpful, right? If they are older and all, then it's a problem because they'll shed microfibers, right? So let me try and look for something which is suggesting that. Ideally, I don't want to go for a very direct point saying do not shed microfibers, right? This is definitely an issue which is there. But end of the day, what are we trying to say? We are saying that buy high quality items. One part is if I'm buying, cheaper stuff secondhand, I might, they are going to shed microfibers. The other thing which is there is what we explained while going through the passage itself, right? If we are buying something secondhand which is cheap, we might wear it 2-3 times and leave it. But if we are buying something which is high quality, which is little more expensive, we might wear it multiple times, right? So it combats both of these issues. So I'm probably looking for something like this, high quality but secondhand stuff, right? So sorry, this is only slow fashion, so this might not even be secondhand. This can just be anything which is high quality, not much of pollution, no microfibers, fewer toxins, anything like that. If that's what we're looking for. So do not shed microfibers is correct, but it's a smaller part of it. We're looking for this overarching answer instead. are sold by genuine vintage stores. Vintage stores are the ones which are selling second-hand stuff, right? This is somewhere it's mentioned. Yeah, London is home to many second-hand or more commonly called vintage shops. So vintage is only second-hand. Here we are not being asked what is second-hand clothes or what are vintage clothes or what are consignment clothes. We're being asked if fast fashion is this, where, we are buying things and we are just, throwing them off pretty quickly, giving rise to a lot of waste and all of that, then what would the opposite of that be? So we got to infer it. So it's not only about secondhand stuff. Do not bleed toxins and dyes, definitely a part of it. Now look at this, right? Do not shed microfibers is also one thing which we will want in slow fashion. Do not bleed toxin and dyes is also something which we will want in slow fashion. Both of these are very, very direct points which are given in the passage. The problem is it's only capturing smaller parts of it. The entire answer is we are looking for something which is higher quality, which doesn't shed microfibers, which doesn't have much toxins, all of it. We will not have something which consists of everything, but given that we have something here saying these would be clothes which are of higher quality and long lasting, this itself is sufficient. Because if it's higher quality, we already know that, it will potentially not shed microfibers. If it is long lasting, we know that, people will wear it for long. They won't throw it, right? And hence, this is something which is reducing the wastage problem. So this is how we would infer over here before we sort of we don't have slow fashion specifically given, but we can understand that if second-hand clothes are an alternative or a solution for fast fashion has to be the one which is resulting in all of this wastage, wearing the clothes and then quickly sort of getting rid of it, so much wastage, and on top of it toxins and dyes and all. So we look for something which is suggesting the opposite. And this is our most overarching sort of answer, right? It doesn't have the direct issues such as microfibers and toxins, but if this is there, if the clothes are high quality and long lasting, we anyway know that these issues would be reduced. They will not go 100%, but they would be reduced. So I'll go for this one, which is my overarching answer. Okay. The central idea of the passage would be undermined if, right? Now, what is the author saying? What is our central idea? Thrifting is something which most people are thinking is good, right? Except for luxury buyers. But we cannot just go and thrift any sort of clothes. Older clothes are a problem. Luxury brands and buyers also, they are not thrifting, right? So thrifting is not as good as people think, right? That is the author's crux. The supporting points are these. So let's look for something which is undermining it, which is weakening this point. So if we can get anything which is suggesting that thrifting is really good, or a lot of luxury clothes are basically being sold secondhand, or that these older clothes, they don't shed microfibers, any of these are the points which would be basically undermining. And especially when you are solving, whether it is past questions, practice questions, or even things with a timer like mocks or daily quizzes that you have here and so on, if you are really thinking like this, hey, what are the things which will strengthen or what are the things which will weaken, you're really exercising your logical reasoning muscle, right? So I definitely recommend that you do that. So now looking at the answers, second-hand clothing sold only high quality clothes. Now this is something which is undermining, because we know that a lot of these older clothes are shedding microfibers, and the solution for that which is given is you buy only high quality stuff, right? So if you're buying high quality stuff, one of the two problems which we have is gone, right? What are the two problems? Luxury brands, this practice is not happening. Older clothes, buying secondhand is not helpful. It is again harming the environment. So this first part is being undermined by the first option. So let's see if there's something better. Otherwise, we'll go for A. Clothes were not thrown and burnt in landfills. Now, if clothes are not thrown and burnt in landfills, that's good. But what if they are thrown and burnt somewhere else? Or what if they just, dumped in the oceans, and then again, those toxins and dyes and all keep leaching into the oceans, right? So this is not solving a problem fully. This is solving one problem fully, the microfiber part. This, we haven't been told what is being done for the clothes. So if not landfill, somewhere it is being trashed, right? It's not tackling the underlying problem of wastage. If we were told that clothes are not being wasted, but they're being reused, or they're being 99% of clothes are being sold secondhand or something, then it would be fine. But so what? They might be thrown somewhere else. So I'm not going for this. Primark and Boohoo recycle their clothes for vintage stores. This is definitely something which is helpful, because we've been told that, helpful in the sense which is undermining, sorry, because we've been told that these are fast fashion brands, right? So if there are at least a couple of fast fashion brands which are recycling their clothes, then, it's not harming the environment as such. However, this is only two brands have been given as examples, right? There could be multiple more fast fashion brands. So this is undermining, but this is undermining a little bit less or a lot less than option A, because out of my two major problems, option A is fully solving one problem. So A is definitely better than C. Customers bought all their clothes online. This is not something which is undermining at all. In fact, the author has told us that, it seems innocent, but it is actually something which is contributing to an industry that is using a lot of energy, or an industry which is harmful. So this is not undermining at all, right? To the extent we can think that, okay, maybe, people are not going and buying secondhand clothes and all. Probably you can buy secondhand clothes also online, right? There are these like ThreadUp, which is given as an example, something where you would buy online. It's not that, you're going to go and buy old clothes from your neighbor. So even the part about buying secondhand, yeah, maybe local organizations part is something which doesn't happen, but this is something which is completely undermining the part where, you have these older clothes which are shedding microfiber and all of that. So I'll go for this one.